Those of you familiar with my high holiday sermons know that sometimes I ask you to do strange things afterwards. Don't worry, you will not have to vote after this morning's sermon. But I thought I'd warn you right at the start. I will ask you to do some homework. Homework, I see your faces asking. Isn't life hard enough right now? How right you are. We live in uncertain times. Who knows what tomorrow or next month will bring? Anti-Semitism, Brexit, catastrophic climate change, and that's only the A, B, and C of uncertainty. We seem to be stuck in a constant state of liminality, in that time period between the what was and the next. The word liminal comes from the Latin word limens, which means threshold. It is the natural way of life that at certain times we find ourselves standing on the threshold. When we graduate university, when we find a new job or lose one, when we commit to a spouse or separate, when we welcome new family members or lose loved ones. But stepping across the threshold brings with it a sense of ambiguity, which seems to threaten the very structure of our life. What will this mean for my sense of belonging, purpose, and identity? How will I adjust to what comes next without losing myself? As we see ourselves and other people escaping from defined categories and roles, we are forced to wrestle with meaning. This liminal period constitutes a time of transition, when one set of meanings and hierarchies is no longer applicable, and another is still held in abeyance. It is a time filled with danger, with possible detrimental effects on our mental well-being. But liminality is also brimming with possibility. As Jews, we have inherited a rich canon of stories anchored in liminality. It is during our time of wandering in the wilderness, during that time of in-betweenness, that the story of our people truly starts. No longer slaves, but not yet a sovereign people. The Jewish people traveled through the wilderness, a symbolic nothingness. The Bible warns us that it is only when we are emptied out, when the generation that clung to its identity has passed, that we are ready to move forward into the promised land. Jewish thought not only acknowledges this liminality, but fills it with meaning. For despite describing a condition of being between moments, liminality is meaningful in its own right. Almost all of the 613 commandments are said to be given to the Jewish people in the wilderness. In Judaism, it is precisely liminal space that is sacred. We literally mark the limens, the threshold, when we affix the mezuzah, the small casing containing inscribed parchment, on the doorposts of our homes. But not only liminal space, but also liminal time is treasured in Judaism, as we mark the beginning and end of Shabbat in our festivals by lighting candles, the flickering flames reminding us of the fragility of transition. And during the Yamim Noraim, the days of awe, during this most holy time of the year, beginning today with Rosh Hashanah, we are instructed to actively immerse ourselves into uncertainty and liminality. The rabbis of old described the state of liminality using the metaphor of 3 books. They taught, 3 books are opened on Rosh Hashanah, one for the completely wicked, one for the completely righteous, and one for those who are in between. The completely righteous are immediately inscribed and sealed for life. The completely wicked are immediately inscribed and sealed for death. Those who are in between are left undecided from Rosh Hashanah until Yom Kippur. Those who deserve it are inscribed for life. Those who do not deserve it are inscribed for death. When reflecting on this teaching, it is easy to focus on the finality of God's judgment. Who shall live and who shall die? But I think this is not what the rabbis wanted to teach us. Instead, I believe they are reflecting on our very human fear that maybe indeed God's judgment is final. But the rabbis challenge us not to succumb to the fear, and instead focus on making the most out of the uncertainty, out of the sense of being in that book in between. For it is in the liminal space that we can open up to ourselves and embark on the process of tshuva, repentance. The British-born contemporary Jewish scholar Aviva Zornberg discusses the midrash in which the rabbis explain why the Jewish people received Yom Kippur. She notes that repentance, tshuva, takes place in the in-between places, the liminal spaces at the petach, the entrance to the tent of meeting, which is both inside and outside, which is in the boundary between holy and profane. And so maybe rather than looking with despair at the news and the uncertainty that we are all experiencing, I want to invite us for a short while to focus on the potential that this liminal space provides for us. Standing at the threshold to a new year, we are presented with the opportunity to take a deep look at ourselves. We are each invited to paint our very own self-portrait, to examine it and then hold ourselves to account for what we see. Who needs a self-portrait these days, you might ask? Aren't we the selfie generation? But the Israeli writer Ori Elon observes an important difference between the selfie and the self-portrait. He notes, a selfie looks out, while a self-portrait turns within. The selfie is a mirror, the self-portrait a window. It is easy to snap a selfie, to look out into the world, to simply present a mirror of ourselves. We do this all year round. Painting a self-portrait is much more difficult. It requires attention to detail, a willingness to face our own vulnerability. It seems almost impossible to even get started. What defines who I am? My physical appearance, my job, my relationships, my hobbies? Aren't most of those things that selfies can capture just as well? Maybe asking what is not the right question. Many of the whats are just what nature throws our way. Let me suggest instead that the place to start is with why. Those of you familiar with the work of the British-American author and organizational consultant Simon Sinek will not be surprised by my suggestion. For those not familiar with Sinek's work or who haven't seen the TED Talk, let me just recap briefly his central thesis. Sinek explains that most individuals and organizations understand pretty well what they do. Some spend time thinking about how they do what they do. But very few people and very few organizations really understand why they do what they do. Yet it is in the why where we find our purpose. Understanding why we do the things we do is the key to finding fulfillment in life. We may not always be able to control what life brings. Will we find ourselves in good health, in a stable job, in a happy relationship? But we can control how we respond to life's challenges. Rosh Hashanah calls us to engage in cheshbon hanefesh, the accounting of the soul. In order to be able to truly hold ourselves to account, for ourselves to pass judgment on how we dealt with life's challenges and opportunities, we need to understand why a certain choice is right or wrong for ourselves. For in many situations, no two choices are the same for every individual. A choice that might be absolutely right for you could be totally wrong for me. This is what the rabbis called Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim. These and also those are the words of the living God. So how do we discover our why? According to Cynic, each of us has only one why. It's not a statement about who we aspire to be. Instead, it expresses who we are when we are at our natural best. At its core, Cynic says, the why is an origin story. By looking to our past and teasing out the most significant threads, the experiences we've had, the people we've been influenced by, the lives we've touched, the highs and lows we've faced, we can identify patterns. To uncover our why, we must bring together our standout memories, our defining moments, and examine them to find the connections. That might sound a little theoretical, but it's actually surprisingly straightforward. Let me illustrate the process using the example of our first ancestor, Abraham. Undoubtedly, we just heard one of the defining stories of his life, the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. It portrays Abraham as fully devoted to God, almost trusting God blindly, a behavior also seen in other stories about his life. The moment when he's first chosen by God and told, Lech lecha, go out. To where? To the land that I will show you. But there are also stories where Abraham challenges God, most famously his debate with God about the fate of the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. Far be it from you to do such a thing, to bring death upon the innocent as well as the guilty, so that innocent and guilty fare alike. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth deal justly? Abraham asks God accusingly. So what do these stories have in common? Abraham is always on a journey, always in dialogue with God, sometimes obediently, sometimes courageously objecting. And there's one other thing that we hear repeatedly. Abraham will go out into the world to bring God's blessing. And so maybe we can formulate Abraham's why, a la Simon Sinek, as to demonstrate what it means to step into the unknown, sometimes blindly, sometimes in protest, but always bravely with conviction, so that I, Abraham, can bring blessing into the world. Abraham truly teaches us what it means to step into the unknown, that sometimes we need to do so blindly trusting, and sometimes we must speak out in protest. But most importantly, the stepping into the unknown serves a purpose, to bring blessing into the world. Abraham's why statement illustrates how we might formulate our own personal why statement. We begin by thinking about the contribution we make to the lives of others, and then reflect on the impact of that contribution. Don't be put off by Abraham's lofty contribution and impact. Our contribution can be large or small, far-reaching or very personal. It will be unique for every one of us. Remember, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim. These and also those are the words of the living God. When the rabbis described human beings as partners with God in the creation of the world, what they wanted to emphasize is that each of us has a contribution to make, and each of us can make an impact. Each of us has their own why, emerging out of the stories of our lives. Not all of these stories will be warm and happy. Hardships, challenges, and grief are all powerful experiences which shape who we are just as much as our achievements do. Remember, Elu ve'elu, divrei Elohim chayim. These and also those are the words of the living God. They all help to paint our self-portrait, or as Cynic puts it, all roads lead to why. And so I want to invite you this year, as we prepare to hold ourselves to account, not just simply to focus on the same old list of missteps that we recite in our vidui, our confession. I want to challenge ourselves to go further, to do some homework until Yom Kippur, to spend the next 10 days on discovering our why. Maybe you will choose to do this by yourself, but it is even more powerful to do so together with a partner who can push you to think beyond the surface, to go out of your comfort zone and uncover memories and experiences that have shaped who you are. And I want to encourage you to take your time for this journey. Cynic reminds us that discovering your why is like panning for gold in the river of the past. The gold is there, lost in the debris of the river, hidden by rushing water. Only when you take the time to pan for the significant moments of the past, retrieving them nugget by nugget, will they turn into a treasure. We can each uncover our very own treasure of why. Whether you're going on this journey by yourself or with someone else, I hope by Yom Kippur you will be able to formulate your why, with which you feel so comfortable that you are happy to share it with others. Just one simple and clear sentence, focused on the effect you will have on others, and expressed in affirmative language that resonates with you. Having a clear idea of our own why by Yom Kippur will mean that we can do a true cheshbon hanefesh, a true accounting of the soul. We will be able to ask ourselves, how did my actions, how did my behavior measure up to my very own best self, my why? How could I have acted differently in a certain situation? What other choices could I have made to be more true to my why? And maybe, more importantly, looking forward beyond Yom Kippur, knowing our own why will help us to weather the storm of uncertainty, not just from A to Z, but from A to Z. It will help us to reflect more clearly on how to respond to whatever life throws at us. It will provide us with an anchor in a choppy sea, and give us strength to make our own unique contribution to being partners with God and renewing the work of creation day by day. Ken Yehi Ratzon. May this be God's will. Amen.